Stručnjaci iz organizacije Earshot, nakon sveobuhvatne analize o tome šta se dogodilo 15. marta na protestu u Beogradu, zaključili su da je vrlo verovatno da su građani bili izloženi napadu upotrebom akustičnog oružja. Kada su pogledali prve snimke, odmah nakon protesta, njihov preliminarni nalaz je bio da se zvuk sa tih snimaka poklapa sa zvukom koje proizvodi vorteks oružje. Za istinomer su objasnili kako su zapravo došli do tog prvog zaključka.
So our initial assessment looked at 12 videos, and we found in 4 of these 12 videos sounds that were consistent with the sound of a vortex cannon. However, after we then started analyzing written statements, over 3,000 written statements, and after we conducted 15 in-depth ear witness interviews, we started to find how the testimonies differed in our initial findings in 2 key ways. The first was that when we were interviewing ear witnesses, we were playing them the sound of the vortex cannon, and this sound was categorically ruled out by all ear witnesses. Secondly, we also found that in many of the written statements and in the ear witnesses, there were descriptions of the sound that they had heard as being engine-like or machinic or vehicle-like in quality. Now, these sounds are not consistent with the way that a vortex cannon works. The vortex cannon works by emitting pressurized air to make sound, whereas these sounds are descriptions of something machinic, something completely different from the mechanisms of a vortex cannon. So these two, for these 2 reasons, our analysis then moved on to following a different kind of line of analysis as to what could have caused the sound.
Organizacija Earshot sada je uradila sveobuhvatnu analizu 19 video zapisa. Zatim uradila je 15 dubinskih intervjua sa svedocima koji su se te večeri nalazili duž ulice Kralja Milana, ali je obradila više od 3000 pisanih izjava prisutnih. Kako je tekao taj proces?
So the investigation itself aims to support the voices of those present on the night of the silent vigil, which was held in memory of the victims of the Novi Sad railway canopy collapse in November 2024. So although protesters consistently reported experiencing an unfamiliar sound that night, official accounts have denied any attack took place. So at the account or the questions of a number of witnesses, of protesters that night, Earshot decided to go on and investigate the case. So the analysis drew on 15 in-depth ear witness testimonies and more than 3,000 written statements. The ear witness testimonies is a methodology developed by the founding director of Earshot, Lawrence Abu Hamdan, and which consists in eliciting memories of witnesses of a very specific event, through the use of sound. And what emerged is a high degree of consistency and cross-corroboration across both sets of accounts, so across the 15 in-depth testimonies and across the more than 3,000 written statements. And these conversions enabled us to reconstruct the anomalous sound that was heard during the vigil. And by presenting a reconstruction of this sound built by its ear witnesses, Earshot's intended to materialize the experience of thousands of people. And the resulting reconstruction constitutes a substantial evidentiary basis. It serves as a sonic identikit of a fugitive sound that, despite overwhelming amounts of witness statements to the contrary, has been denied by authorities and has evaded as well capture on recording devices, an explanation of which is provided right in our report. So the sound represents an approximation of how the sound was described by the witnesses that night. So it was based on repeated and consistent accounts, and therefore it directly challenges attempts to discredit the protesters' experience of that night. So through the investigation, we concluded that all 15 ear witnesses shared the perception of a sudden, unfamiliar sound that was rapidly approaching and external to the crowd, which was a sound associated to a profound sense of impending physical impact. So the consistency across the testimonies is indicative of the crowd's high attentiveness and responsiveness to their surroundings in the moments leading up to the sonic attack. The ear witnesses were able to remember with clarity the sonic constitution of the vigil because they were concerted in their efforts to remain silent, right? So any interruption of this silence would have been registered more acutely. And this demonstrated, which led us actually to observe a demonstrated sensitivity to sound during the interviews. For example, through the ear witnesses' ability to discern and recall a cough sometimes about 200 meters away, sometimes 100 meters away. Other ear witnesses precisely recalling the presence of quadcopters flying overhead prior to the attack, and sometimes even two witnesses recalling a popcorn machine popping from time to time, right? So these details, this description of the surrounding environment is indicative of their exceptional acoustic conditions that they collectively manifested. So in a sense, we could say that it was an attack on the right to collectively be silent. So it was an interruption of this silence. So establishing that the ear witnesses were in a clear analytical state not only challenges official claims, right, that both that no attack happened and that the witnesses weren't able to discern the different sounds, right? This establishment of a clear analytical state also provides us with a reliable base to then go on and attempt to reconstruct the sound that was heard by these ear witnesses at night. So having established this, we then observed an overwhelming consistency and cross-corroboration across the 15 ear witness interviews and the aggregated 3,244 written statements. Right? So by a process of asking specific questions, right, of understanding the surrounding or the moments leading up to the silent vigil, to understanding what sounds did the ear witnesses hear, right, we constructed these ear witness testimonies. So it was first important to us to understand what was happening in the moment leading up to the silent vigil, and then to get from them as precise as possible a description of the sound of the sonic attack they heard. So this was, the ear witness testimony was really structured around this. And then came in the 3,244 written statements, which one corroborated the results of these testimonies, but also provided further information on the nature of both the sound and the event. So we could conclude around four characteristics, sound characteristics, right? So first, it was a non-familiar sound. A vast majority of the witnesses said they never heard a sound like that before. And on top of that, 60% of the written statements used at least a combination of two sounds to describe what they heard, right? I mean, using at least two sounds to describe the sound you heard demonstrate that you have no specific word to describe that sound that you heard, which means that you don't know what it was. Second, there's this machinic vehicle-like sound, right? 1,907 witnesses from the written statements, right, described the machinic vehicle-like sound. Ear witnesses that were interviewed consistently described how they were convinced they were about to be hit by something machinic, right? A jet flying overhead, 200 bikers coming at us, a car like just about to start and rolling over us. Third, there was this highly directional component of the sound. Ear witnesses consistently describe the sound as highly directional, as something coming towards them or passing over them. 11 out of the 15 ear witnesses interviewed described or explicitly described that the sound was approaching from the north of Kraja Milana Boulevard, right, from the direction of Teraja Square. And what is interesting is that despite them knowing the direction of the sound, they were unable to locate a source to this sound, right? And this further participated to the fact that this highly directional sound was also perceived as a non-familiar sound, which then led to fear and disorientation, right? So although they were able to describe where that sound was coming from, the ear witnesses were unable to locate that source. And this absence of a visible source is what caused such an intense physical experience, right? And it contributed to this pervasive sense of fear and disorientation. And then a further 12% of the written statements, they pointed to a clear sensation of fear and distress. This included a sense of impending danger, right? Like something is coming at us and we don't know what it was. And finally, there is this aspect of an embodied sound. So it was not only a sound that was heard, right? It was a sound that was perceived as something highly physical. So a vast majority, just 72% of the written statements, which amounts to 2,335 statements, right? They describe this auditory experience not just through sound, but also as a physical sensation. It was inside me. It was going through me. I felt it in my muscles, right? It was in my bones. So this consistency in description enabled us to reduce an initial library of 26 audio samples to 3 sounds. And while none of the 3 sounds alone precisely replicated the reported sound, when we layered and spatialized them, right, according to these 4 characteristics which I've just named, a plausible acoustic reconstruction was possible. And again, right, this reconstruction serves as an evidentiary basis of the thousands of accounts from that night. And this is what's important, right? So we could conclude finally that the experience was highly unfamiliar, both in its perceived appearance and as an acoustic experience in itself. So in other words, the earwitnesses described an unfamiliar sound that also behaved in an acoustically anomalous way, which gave us an indication as to the use of a device that creates a distinct and rarely occurring propagation of sound. The important thing, right, is that you have official claims saying nothing happened, right? And then you have thousands of voices who are saying, no, something happened, but we don't know what it was, right? So just demonstrating through these 15 in-depth earwitness interviews and through the corroboration with these more than 3,000 written statements, right, demonstrating that that something happened, and then being able to reconstruct the sound on this basis is what's, again, I know I've said it already, but I cannot highlight it enough, right? This is what's important.
Izveštaj se završava zaključkom da je moguće da je te večeri korišćeno dugometno akustično sredstvo L-rad, posebno model 450 XL, za koje je poznato da je u posedu srpske policije.
Although the report does end on a study or analysis of the LRAD 450 XL, it does not conclusively say that this was the sonic weapon that was used, right? And this is very important to highlight. Now I'll explain why is it that we looked into this sonic weapon specifically, and how does this somehow, coincide with many of the characteristics of the sound that was described by the earwitnesses that night. But still, it is important to say that we cannot conclusively determine or ascertain that this was the weapon that was used, okay? So again, while the primary aim was not to identify the precise weapon used, right, but to demonstrate that the sonic attack did occur, several factors led us to consider the LRAD 450 XL as a plausible source, okay? So the first one being that on March 19, Member of Parliament Marina Tepic publicly stated on the platform X, which was formerly Twitter, that the Serbian government possessed such a device, the LRAD 450 XL. And then she supported her claim with the photographic evidence. And finally, an anonymous source from the gendarmerie corroborated its presence across different locations that night, and also the possibility of it being activated if necessary. Okay, so these are already 3 main elements that told us, okay, this is a direction that we could investigate. So upon reviewing the LRAD 450's XL user manual, we found that its technical specifications closely aligned with the acoustic features described by the earwitnesses, meaning, right, that this device could reproduce the sound characteristics described by the earwitnesses, namely highly directional sound propagation, an unfamiliar acoustic texture, a perceptual ambiguity because they didn't know where the sound was coming from, and then an embodied auditory experience, okay? So if we look at the technical context of the LRAD 450 XL, it is a long-range acoustic device capable of transmitting voice or sound at volumes up to 145 decibel, with clarity and over long distances. It can emit sound in a narrow 30-degree cone and maintains intelligibility over 1.7 kilometers, which is more than the length of the Kraja Milana Boulevard. Its acoustic array structure produces a distinct directional pattern due to phase inversion, which is unlike typical omnidirectional sound spread.
A početkom nedelje ministar unutrašnjih poslova Ivica Dačić je ponovio da takozvani zvučni top nije korišćen. Istakao je da ta opcija na L-rad uređaju je svakako blokirana.
Reč je o L-rad uređajima koji se koriste za zvučnu signalizaciju u smislu upozorenja ljudi da se raziđu. Ona može imati drugi mod, a to je da ako se demonstranti ne raziđu, mogu da se puste određeni neprijatni tonovi koji mogu da utiču na demonstrante. Imajući u vidu sve to, ja sam i tada rekao, na osnovu informacije policije, da ti uređaji nikada nisu korišćeni, što je tačno.
Dačić je potom pustio primjer, kako je on rekao, uznemirajućih sadržaja koji se mogu emitovati sa tih uređaja, ali koji se, kako je rekao, te večeri nisu čuli.
Commonly used for crowd control and deterrence, and utilize a beam of ultrasound, sound frequencies higher than 20,000 hertz, directed at the target. Depending on the frequency and intensity, these sounds can disrupt or even totally destroy the eardrums of the target, or at a minimum cause nausea or discomfort. An LRAD, or long-range acoustic device, was used to board the cruise ship Seaborne Spirit to keep pirates from boarding at around 5:50.
Znači, ta priča je završena. Dženazis je dao izjavu da ko je proizvođač ovoga, da naši uređaji nisu korišćeni.
Iz Earshota objašnjavaju da preko L-rad uređaja može se pustiti bilo koji zvuk.
So because the LRAD 450XL supports MP3 playback, right, this means it can emit any uploaded sound to it, including broad spectrum audio, such as the white noise or vehicle acceleration effects, which were identified by the ear witnesses that we interviewed. So with the ability to maintain over 80 decibels of sound pressure across 1.7 kilometer range, a sound could be projected from such a device along the entire stretch of the boulevard, and this is where the vigil took place, along the Kraja Milana Boulevard.
Dok smo slušali negiranje da je korišćeno bilo kakvo zvučno oružje, kao argument su nam nudili i to da se na snimcima građana zabeleženim te večeri ne čuje zvuk nekog od tog oružja.
So again, while we cannot say conclusively what weapon was used, we could offer an explanation of why the sound also did not overtly appear on recording devices that we were able to analyze, despite being acutely perceived by those present that night. So first, there's the highly directional propagation of the sound. Angular rotation of over 80 degrees, can reduce the intensity of the LRAD 450XL to a level that is indistinguishable from or quieter than the ambient noise of the crowd during the attack. And on top of this, you would add the ability to reduce further the width of the LRAD's front beam operational zone, which would reduce its propagation, the sound propagation. So the ability to upload any sound to the device, such as white noise, which was similar to the sound identified by ear witnesses, instead of integrating, would integrate in the background noise much more easily than the siren sounds, which are already present, that come with the LRAD 450XL. Third, you have the sound energy absorption capacity of several of thousands of people that were present that night. And on top of this, you have the rapid onset of a crowd noise at the moment of the attack, This would further absorb the sound. Then there's the position of the cameras to which Earshot had access to for analysis. And finally, you have the recording capabilities of the cameras, specifically the speech intelligibility algorithms and signal processing compression in mobile devices. So we believe, therefore, that the absence of the sound on the recording devices could indicate, rather than disqualify, the use of an LRAD-like device, given the specific and patented mechanisms by which it propagates sound from its speaker array, But again, we cannot conclusively say that this was the weapon used, So maybe to conclude, we could say that while the unidentifiable sounds captured in available recordings cannot be conclusively linked to the LRAD 450XL, The evidence supports correlative relationship between the anomalous sound event described by the witnesses and the ear witnesses that night and a weapon with a uniquely directional acoustic profile, such an LRAD 450XL, right? So the possibility that such a device was used during the silent vigil cannot be ruled out, right? Although we cannot conclusively say that this was it just cannot be ruled out.
I da podsjetimo, početkom aprila Istinomer je preneo preliminarno mišljenje profesora socijalne psihologije Clifforda Stotta, koji je nakon što je pogledao snimke zabeležene te večeri, odnosno 15. marta, naveo da ponašanje ljudi koji su se nalazili duž ulici Kralja Milana nije rezultat neke lažne uzbune, već ukazuje na postojanje neke spoljašnje sile koja ih je nagnala takvo ponašanje. Zabeležili smo i njegovo mišljenje, zabeležili smo i izjave predstavnika vlasti i nastavit ćemo da pratimo ovaj slučaj. Vi pratite nas.